We're back. And Olivia, I have a question for you because we've talked about a lot of stuff over the past month and a half, 2 months now that we've been recording about um, some of the niche issues in health that you see in your practice and that I've been curious about. But we've touched on gut health a little bit, and that kind of seems like what a lot of this stuff ties back to. How many people, or how common is it that the average American will say deals with gut dysbiosis in 2025 in your
Yeah. I mean, I can't speak for, every American as a whole, or I suppose I can, just given what I know about like what's in our food supply and what most, Americans are typically eating. But I
right?
will say in my practice, I mean, I do a lot of gut testing and I run a test called the GI map.
Yeah.
And 9 times out of 10, my clients have dysbiosis. And what that means is, so if we think about our gut health or our microbiome, there's trillions and trillions of different kinds of bacteria that exist within our microbiome. And this research is really in its infancy, but it's really promising in the sense that what they're discovering is that our microbiome is like its whole thing, and it literally controls or influences literally every facet of our health. And so again, when we think about what dysbiosis is, it's just an imbalance of good bacteria to bad bacteria. So we have good bacteria that contributes to digestion, it helps with breaking down the food that we're eating, it helps with nutrient absorption and assimilation, and then there's of course bad inflammatory bacteria that can lead to inflammation. Chronic inflammation, it can impair nutrient absorption, it can lead to leaky gut. And so, again, when I am running the GI map in my practice, 9 times out of 10, more often than not, most people do have dysbiosis. And when we're thinking of this country as a whole, I would assume, I mean, I could say with confidence that probably 95% of people have dysbiosis. And a lot of that can be attributed to diets high in alcohol, diets high in refined sugar, pesticides, glyphosate, all of these chemicals that inevitably end up in our food and water supply, of course, contribute to an imbalance of that good to bad bacteria.
I don't think anybody needs to be a health professional to know that downstream of inflammation is like a whole host of problems. But is it fair to say that something as I think what we've learned, or what I've learned from talking to you over the past couple of sessions is that I say sessions like you're like my counselor, but sessions is that we have a lot of things that we wouldn't normally attribute to our gut health that manifest in physically. Like, is it safe to say things as benign as like a headache or just an ache or a pain somewhere in your body could be the result of gut dysbiosis? Can that be a root cause?
Definitely. More inadvertently, like it's not very direct, but
Yeah.
for sure. I mean, inflammation in our gut can impact inflammation in the rest of our body. And of course, we have to think of it as like our gut is the interface for all nutrient absorption and assimilation. And so if we have compromised gut function in any way, that's going to impact our body's ability to absorb nutrients from the food that we're eating.
Right.
Most people are deficient in a lot of nutrients just given the fact that like our soil is depleted of nutrients, therefore the food that we're eating is less nutrient dense than it was even 50 years ago. And so if we have impaired gut function, again, that's going to negatively impact our gut's ability to absorb and assimilate these nutrients, which can lead to inflammation in other parts of our body in and of itself.
Now, you have mentioned in more than one episode some of the foods that you can eat to re-regulate your system and maybe aid in the stasis of your gut. But I'm curious because I think it was last episode or 2 episodes ago we talked about how healing trauma through like talk therapy and things like that is actually a good way to re-regulate the system, lower cortisol like that. I'm sure that there are many ways to ingest something to re-regulate your gut, but I wonder, does the gut respond when, you approach it from like a holistic, not a holistic method, but let's say we were to talk about the go back to the healing trauma piece. If I was to mentally be more at ease, would my
Mhm.
gut follow suit, or does it all start in the gut?
Mm.
Like, is that something you know anything about?
Yes, I love this question. I feel like that's such a valid question. Yes, I mean, stress and trauma, and I think this is what you're asking.
Yeah.
These things can definitely influence our gut. So we
Right.
have bidirectional communication that exists between our gut and our brain, and
Yeah.
this is via a nerve called the vagus nerve.
Mm.
And so you've probably heard of the vagus nerve. A lot of people talk about it. But if we have trauma, if we have like a big traumatic, say a big traumatic event happens to us in our formative years or in our adult life, that can contribute to irregularities in our vagus nerve, which can have downstream impacts on our gut health. It can slow motility, it can lead to inflammation, and definitely, I mean, I see so many people in my practice that struggle with like anxiety-induced IBS. So
Mm.
when they have, like for example, they get social anxiety or anxiety in any sense, they might experience like a sense of urgency. They have to go to the bathroom, or even vice versa. There can be anxiety-induced like constipation even, and
Yeah.
um, really addressing like the vagus nerve piece and the nervous system piece. So like engaging in breath work practices or getting like a TENS unit or even like humming, gargling, singing. These things can be really good for the vagus nerve. That
Yeah.
can positively influence our gut health.
That was my next question too, is are there other therapeutic remedies that could help? So a massage or the TENS unit or something else that's stimulating my nerves, maybe from like a skin level, could
Mm.
theoretically impact my gut too. Wow.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, anything that's going to help you tap into your parasympathetic nervous system, which is there's two parts of our autonomic nervous system. We have the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. The sympathetic is like fight or flight, go, 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 which most of us are in the majority of the time. But if we could intentionally through like our own practices, or if we get a massage, or yeah, if we're wearing a TENS unit or we're doing, breathing practices or meditation, that can shift us into the parasympathetic state, which is going to be better for our microbiome.
Wow, really cool. This is all great because I feel like you've yelled at me more than once on Instagram for some of the stuff I eat, and I feel like
Good out of love.
maybe I'm not necessarily always doing the right thing from a nutritional standpoint, but it does make me feel better that maybe in some respect I can alleviate that by doing a little bit of self-care and yeah, calming my nervous system down and re-regulating my gut. I want to go back to the dysbiosis topic because I think you listed off quite a few things that can cause dysbiosis. And I'm sure we talked about this in a previous episode, but I don't think it hurts to revisit it and revisit what causes those things. Is there a hierarchy? Are you able to kind of put it in like this is the most prevalent disruptor? You listed off glyphosate and a couple other things. I think we talked about PFAs as well, and pollution in the air. Is there any one thing that takes precedent as like the most
Mhm.
dysregulatory thing, or is it another case dependent kind of question?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to put into a hierarchy. I could give a list maybe of like some of the most ubiquitous ones, some of the ones that are found most commonly in people's lives that are contributing to dysbiosis, but they all are kind of on the same playing field.
Okay.
Um, Definitely glyphosate
Yeah.
is so terrible for our gut, can definitely contribute to leaky gut. Any kind of pesticide, like toxic pesticides that are sprayed on our fruits and vegetables, antibiotics,
Yeah.
which are commonly found as a byproduct in the meat that we consume,
Mm.
unless we consume meat that was not fed antibiotics, then that's going to, obviously transfer to our system and contribute to dysbiosis. Alcohol is a big one. Seed oils,
Yep.
huge.
Yep.
Seed oils are found frequently in like restaurant food. So being really cautious about that. And then refined sugar is another one, which is another thing that tends to be ubiquitous in our food supply, especially when it comes to eating processed foods, and dining out, and stress. Those are
Going,
my top
yeah, oh, go
six,
ahead.
seven.
Yeah. Going back to glyphosate. I more or less am familiar with all the other ones you mentioned, especially seed oils, because that one pops up a lot. Run me through the function of glyphosate. Like, I always think when I hear the origin stories of these chemicals, I'm like, oh, well, it seems like we could do without that. We almost always can, right?
Mhm.
Um, how did glyphosate come into play as a toxin? What is it supposed to do, or what do they say it does, and why is it put on,
Mhm.
so many different foods or in so many different foods?
Glyphosate is like an herbicide, so it was created from this pharmaceutical company. Well, they're technically not a pharmaceutical company. I think they may be owned by a pharmaceutical company or at least working in cahoots with them at least.
Yeah,
But it's basically like an herbicide and a pesticide. So it's sprayed on crops to help with preventing like you
bugs
know
from eating
bugs,
crops.
yeah, damage from fungus and bacteria and things like that. And it helps with like mass production.
Right,
So growing foods in large quantities. It's definitely very heavily sprayed on wheat crops. That's
mm,
why a lot of people tend to not do so well with gluten, especially in America.
right,
I think we had this conversation. Like a lot of people go to Europe and have no issue eating the bread there, and then they come back. I mean, I've seen that every summer. I talk to
yeah,
all my clients. They're in Europe. They're feeling great. They come back to America. They're eating bread. They feel like shit. A
yeah,
lot of that could be due to the glyphosate that is so heavily sprayed on the wheat
right,
in this country. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's basically meant to help support the mass production of food. Ultimately, I mean, we have a lot of people to feed in this country, which is very, very, very valid, right? So we need to have, the farmers need to produce a lot of food to support our growing population. But at the same rate, it's like, well, at what cost? Because glyphosate is very toxic.
right. I've
It
seen
has
this.
even been linked as like a carcinogen.
I've seen this debate had online about, yes, we have a lot of people and farmers need to make money too. Totally understand that.
Yeah, yeah.
But there's also the question of how much of this carcinogen are we going to take into our body before we decide this is enough, or when will we know if it's enough? Oftentimes we don't before it manifests in the form of some illness or, God forbid, a cancer, right? Um, Go
Right,
ahead.
and it's so hard to provide a direct link. Like, how do you prove that?
Yeah,
I was eating all this food with glyphosate and now I have XYZ cancer. It's like
exactly.
nobody knows what contributes to cancer.
Right.
It's just such a hard thing to measure, but
Yeah.
my intuition tells me that.
Could be something there. I don't disagree.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a correlation. The causation obviously super hard to prove, but if you were to if I'm thinking of workarounds for beating the glyphosate, the glyphosate problem, shopping locally for produce, farmers markets, does that help, or can we not even trust the farmers markets?
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to a farmer's market and you're talking to the farmers, and I mean, local is always preferred, right? Because there's less transit time from the farm to your plate, essentially,
Yeah,
which just means more nutrient retention. But a lot of small farmers are not using a whole lot of like toxic pesticides. But it's good to go to the farmer's market. Yeah, shop local, of course, for a lot of different reasons that are beneficial for your health. But talking to the farmers, seeing what they're using, if anything, or what methods they're using for preventing like spoilage. There's a kind of farming. I used to be really into this. I think it's like they rotate crops, like
uh,
crop rotating,
okay,
something along those lines. That is actually really beneficial for preventing. It's like an organic, natural method of preventing spoilage. And yeah, you don't use pesticides. So maybe asking your farmer what they do or if they use that
right.
instead.
Okay, zooming out to the bigger toxicity question. I was looking at your Instagram, I think a week ago, and somebody had asked you a question about different types of food that and ways to source it.
Mhm.
And you had said something about olive oil, and I was at a farmer's market this weekend, and I'm like, all right, I got to make sure that the bottle is a dark bottle, and it's cold pressed, and I went and got
Yes.
that exact bottle of olive oil. Are there specific foods when we talk about all of these carcinogens that are higher in that concentration? I obviously had to toss my big clear bottle of Barrio olive oil because I was like, this is not good for me.
I
Um,
saw your spring water too.
yes, I got my spring water. I'm fully stacked in the holistic nutrients department. But are there? I think we talked about water being a big one. Are there other foods, liquids that we should be especially cautious of when it comes to these carcinogens?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mentioned wheat. That's a big one. If
Yeah,
you're going to be consuming wheat, I always recommend it organic. I mean, in a perfect world, we're all consuming organic everything.
yeah,
But especially if we're going to, which is the more cost-effective option, if we're going to be picking and choosing what we're buying organic and what we're not, I recommend always referencing the environmental working groups Clean 15 and Dirty Dozen list that they conduct this research every year.
yep,
And they come out with studies on what produce tends to be the most contaminated with pesticides,
yeah.
and what tends to be the least contaminated with pesticides.
So
A
glad you brought this up, by the way, because I wrote a newsletter about this like a month or two ago, and I don't know if they've released this year's yet, but I'm gonna link it in this article because it's yeah,
Okay.
love that. I love that list.
It's so, so valuable. But a good rule of thumb is to buy fruits and vegetables that you're eating the skin of. Try to
Yeah,
eat those or buy those organic. So other foods like fruits and vegetables that you're not eating the skin of, like avocados and bananas, tend to be less important to buy organic.
right. Very sad about my leafy greens because I love leafy greens, but those I apparently tend to be sprayed a little bit more, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So
Strawberries are like the dirtiest.
strawberries too.
Every year.
Love my strawberries, but man, I might need to put them on the back burner for a little bit, at least until I can find a closer source from which to buy them.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I really love that list. I think it's super important for people to focus on. That had me wanting to segue into another question that escaped me, and I'm probably gonna have to come back to it at some point when it comes to me. But what would you say are the oh, I just remembered my question. So let's say somebody does heed all of our advice that we've talked about here in the first 15, 20 minutes of the conversation. They go and buy organic, and they're sourcing all their foods as best they can. Is it possible, that somebody could still suffer from gut dysbiosis even if all the nutritional things are going right? Does the stuff we talked about before, like stress and high cortisol and maybe an irregular mental state, still put someone at risk for dysbiosis even if they're eating everything correctly?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I mean, it's really, really hard
Yeah.
to avoid all of those things
Yeah. True.
completely in this day and age.
Yeah.
So it would be really hard, number one, to get all the things nutritionally right, um, and have like the perfect microbiome as a result, again, in this day and age. But hypothetically, if somebody was doing all of that and doing a really good job at it, definitely stress can still impact
Yeah.
um, can impact the microbiome negatively.
Good to know. I mean, I think I realized how silly that question might have been retroactively after I asked it because
No, it's
getting
valid.
getting all of that correct is very difficult, but also completely avoiding the big pharma, if you will, the pharmaceutical system, and not finding your way into not taking any sort of medication is also trickier than it seems. Because I think in early episodes we talked about how birth control and a lot of
Yeah.
supplement, not of supplements, but a lot of medications that especially women can take
Mhm.
can be the source of dysregulation in that arena as well. So, yeah, it's tough. I feel like there's aside from moving to Europe, there's very few cases in which somebody can be perfectly regulated.
Yeah,
Um,
100%.
is there a new protocol to kind of give people your perspective or your and a look into kind of your world, is there a protocol that you're following specifically, maybe something you're experimenting with in like your recent research that maybe you're trialing for yourself to see how it affects you personally, or is it something that you can name off the top of your head?
Yeah. You mean with like gut health and
Yeah, anything from gut health to, just general nutrition.
yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm glad you brought this up. I have been experimenting. Well, I haven't yet, but I just started working with this company to experiment with peptides.
Cool.
Totally off topic from from the microbiome, but there's a lot of research on peptides, and I'm really, really excited to dig deeper into it. I don't know if you know anything or how much you know, but there's basically like no harm that can be done with peptides. They're literally just like uh, branched chain. They're amino acids. It's
Right.
like branched chain amino acids, and so there's really no risk for toxicity. They can really only do good and no harm. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of different ones that can help a lot of different things. So I'm really, really looking forward to getting into this world and trialing things myself. And I have a lot of clients that are interested in them too. So now I'm working with this really high quality company. I trust them a lot. I trust their sourcing. So I'm looking forward to getting into that.
That's really cool. I mean, you're probably right in that it doesn't deal directly with the microbiome, but
Mm.
I would imagine, like we talked about earlier, indirectly, there's probably some effect that the peptides could have on how the gut is regulated or dysregulated.
Yeah,
Um,
like BPC 157.
557.
Yeah, that one has a lot of gut healing properties.
I've seen that it's
Really
a
good.
huge anti-inflammatory agent. I'd want to hear more down the road as to
Yeah,
if you're
once I
trying or
learn.
experimenting with it because I did some preliminary research on it a few months ago. I wrote an article about it. Aside from like some scant cases in which I've heard it could lead to some, I don't know if it's high blood pressure or blood clotting if used in like very high doses. I don't know how accurate that is. I heard Huberman mention it once or
Oh,
twice.
okay.
But I
Okay.
don't know if that is because of there's maybe there was some pre-existing condition, like if somebody already has high blood pressure, could it lead to, vascular issues? I don't know. There was something on there that I'll have to maybe put in the footnotes of the newsletter, but I've heard about its anti-inflammatory properties. I've had multiple people ask me like, "Hey, have you ever taken this?" I'm like, "No." Honestly, I never felt, and knock on wood here, but I've never felt injured or sore or maybe like beaten up to the point where I need to use it because it really sounds like something that will help you like recover from a bad injury or
Yeah.
spell.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. For sure, yeah, it's supposed to really help with like the structural integrity of like the joints, and it's supposed to help with like collagen and all of that. I actually have a client in LA who has pretty bad PMR, which is like inflammation of the joints, especially like the ankles, the feet. I have a session with him, I think next week. I'm going to recommend the BPC 157. I know he'd be open to it, so I'll keep you updated on how that goes. It's supposed to help with inflammation across the board.
yeah, I've seen a lot of that. Yeah, I mean, hey, if there's ever a scenario where I might feel like my joints are really sore and stiff, there might be an opportunity for it down the road. But of course, I'm going to wait for somebody like you who I know and trust to vet it first, because
Yeah.
I've definitely had instances where I've had clients just like, "Hey, I'm taking this now," and I'm like, "Well, okay, that's on you. Like, I'm not going to assume
Mhm.
any responsibility for it."
Yeah.
When we talk about the ways in which your gut can control pretty much everything, it seems like, is there kind of like a surefire method to, aside from like eating organic foods, that someone can take um, from a stress management perspective that will kind of keep them regulated, like aside from maybe the basics like get good sleep, try to find time to relax throughout the day. We talked about sunlight in a previous episode and just how that re-regulates things.
Mhm.
What's maybe a hidden wellness tool that can help with gut regulation that might not be on everybody's radar?
Yeah. There's a couple things. I mean, I just also want to put a disclaimer out there when it comes to any like supplements or food or any recommendations I'm making, you definitely want to make sure that you're testing first
Yeah.
because everybody is so unique and everybody is so different. And so if you're going to be making any adjustments to your supplement routine or your nutrition routine, you definitely want to test first and see what exactly it is you need because what's good for one person might not be good for the next person. Like, for example, actually, this is really important for me to mention because a lot of people think that fermented foods are across the board really, really good for them. And for the most part, they are. They contain probiotics that can help to re-inoculate our system with good bacteria. But if you have an overgrowth of bacteria in your microbiome that are considered to be mast cell activators or direct histamine producers, fermented foods like sauerkraut and kimchi that's like when you're eating those, you're basically just adding fuel to the fire and exacerbating the histamine issue because there's a lot of histamines in fermented foods.
Wow.
And having an overload of histamines, like what the literature is saying now, is that they're kind of like connecting the dots. Having an overload of histamines in your system can contribute to a whole host of like seemingly unrelated symptoms. Bloating is a big one. Obviously, that's a little bit more direct with the microbiome, but headaches, chronic pain, they're even drawing correlations between insomnia and PMS and anxiety. Like, there's so many things that we're finding now that histamines can play a role.
Wow.
And having too many histamines in our microbiome definitely influences that. Again, if we have an overgrowth of these bacteria that produce histamines or activate mast cells, that can be a big contributor and a big issue.
Wow. Okay.
So fermented foods, generally, yes, they're really good, but if you have an overgrowth of
Yeah. Not
mast cell
overdo
activating bacteria, then you don't want to be eating a whole lot of fermented foods.
So don't overdo the fermented foods, which are high in probiotics. I'm not sitting here downing kimchi, so I'm not necessarily worried about that. Am I still good to do my kefir milk? I've been on a kefir milk kick lately. I know that's super high in probiotics, but did that
Mhm.
have the same effect? Hopefully not, right? Because I've been having like a little yogurt bowl every morning, and now I'm a little worried.
Yeah. Well, it's no, you should be fine. I mean, you're not having any overt symptom, right? You're feeling good. You're not having like headaches or bloating or
Yeah.
insomnia. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. No, you're totally fine. Again, generally they are really, really good, but if you're symptomatic in any way, it's probably best to test first,
Yeah.
to see if histamines could potentially be at play.
That's a really good tidbit of info, actually. One of my, new things that I learned on today's episode, actually. So,
Yeah.
to kind of wrap up the conversation of gut health, like just to give a recap,
Mhm.
of course, we want to be very conscious of organic food. In some cases, gluten. My wife is on a gluten-free kick right now, and she already says she feels a lot better. Um, and just being very conscious of our mental state and what kinds of foods we're eating, not overdoing the fermented food, being really diligent about where we're getting our food from. um, did I miss anything? Are there other do you have any more like recommendations? I know you said supplements kind of vary on the person,
Mhm.
as to how to keep tabs on gut
Yeah.
health and gut dysbiosis.
Yeah. Truthfully, I feel like we just kind of scratched the surface.
Mm.
There's so much more to discuss when it comes to gut health. One general thing I also like to recommend to my clients is to get a variety of fruits and vegetables in their diet.
Yeah.
And this may seem silly or it may seem like really simple, but what the research has shown is that having a wide variety of bacteria in our gut. So there's, again, like I mentioned at the beginning of our call, there's trillions and trillions of different kinds of bacteria that live and exist within our microbiome, and there's different classes. So we have many different kinds of bacteria, and these bacteria all have different functions essentially. And what the research has shown is that the diversity of the bacteria in your gut is actually what contributes to better health outcomes and just like a healthy microbiome overall. Like that's one of the defining factors when it comes to gut health is having a diverse range of these bacteria.
Mm.
And so with our gut, it's kind of like a three-tiered system. So we have the probiotics, but these probiotics feed on prebiotics.
Right.
And so prebiotics are only found in fiber. There's many different kinds of prebiotics found within many different kinds of fibrous foods. And so that's why the diversity is so important because when you're eating many different kinds of prebiotic fibers, you're able to feed the many different classes of probiotics that live naturally within your gut. And then these probiotics produce what are called postbiotics or short chain fatty acids like acetate and butyrate. And these serve as the food source for the cells that line your gut to help prevent leaky gut and help to boost up that mucosal layer, which plays a really big role in your immune system and fighting off pathogens.
Right.
So again, it's kind of like a three-tiered system, but that is something I like to recommend when we're thinking about like the lowest hanging fruit to optimize gut health, eating a wide variety of fruits and vegetables. I recommend 30 different plant foods every week if you can, which if you're doing like a smoothie on a daily basis, that tends to be easy to hit. And that can include anything. It could be nuts and seeds, it can be legumes like beans, lentils, chickpeas, whole grains, and then of course, fruits and vegetables.
So postbiotics we create, is that right? We as a result of having, or can we ingest postbiotics?
We can, yeah. There's supplements that you can take, like acetate and butyrate. Like butyrate is a big one. A lot of people do take butyrate,
Got it.
but we can't like eat butyrate. It's only produced like in a food form. It's
Got
only produced by the bacteria in our
it.
gut.
So, just because that last piece is really interesting. Final question here, I promise. If we're talking eating order, because I know there's like a whole subsection of people who are really nerding out. It's like you have to
Let's
eat
figure balance.
your there's like an author whose book I bought just to kind of see. She's very much like you need to eat your vegetables first and then your carbs. I'm like, I don't know how far
Get
down
that book.
I don't know how far down that
Glucose
rabbit hole you go, but I followed it for a little while, and it was, to her credit, I did feel a little more full when I ate that way. So there's something to the satiety aspect of it. But do prebiotics coming first matter when it comes to ingestion, and then probiotics second? Or if I have them both in the same sitting, am I still going to get the same bacterial effect in my gut, or do I need to ingest one first?
Yeah, yeah, I see your thought process there. It's very valid.
Yeah.
Um, but no, not necessarily. If
Okay.
you're eating like a lot of fiber and then some sauerkraut in the same sitting, it's not necessarily going to have a negative effect on the way it's like metabolized. But with the blood sugar, yeah, it's a whole different
Yeah,
conversation.
conversation, which we'll probably have to kick to the second one about gut health. If there's more to talk about, I definitely want to get to it. But
Yeah.
at least I can feel good until we meet next because in those probiotic yogurt bowls, I also put like some pumpkin seeds in there, and I'm mixing my pre and my pro, and I'm like, oh God, does one have to come before the other? But I think I'm okay. And
Yeah.
am I?
Don't think about it too much.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a nice little takeaway to end the episode with. Well, thank you for that. I think we need to expand on it a little bit more. I'm going to look to you though to kind of take the reins on the next combo. If there's more to
Yeah.
delve into, I definitely want to give the readers more to listen to.
Yeah.
But this was super informative. Thanks as always, Olivia, and we will see you guys next week.
Bye.
Where is my? Here we go.